Namaskar, welcome to PK's classes. Today we will study the different types of research. So, what is research? Research is derived from two words, re and search. And when we say search, that is investigation. And when there is a purpose of investigation, we call it as a research. So research is purposeful investigation and it provides a structure for decision making. So research provides a structure which helps in decision making. So what is this investigation all about? There are three parts. So the first part is the implicit question posed, the question which is not clear, and the explicit answer proposed, a clear and clear-cut answer. And third part is the collection, analysis and interpretation of the information leading from the implicit question to the explicit answer. And this part is called the research. Now, types of research. On the basis of the fundamental objectives of the research, we can classify research into two types. One is exploratory research and the other is conclusive research. And what is exploratory research? The researcher opts for exploratory research when the problem is broad and poorly defined. And exploratory research uses a less formal approach. It pursues several possibilities simultaneously, and in a sense, it is not quite sure of its objectives. So, the approaches can be there can be three typical approaches in exploratory research. One is literature survey, the second is experience survey, third is the case studies. The literature survey is fast, economic. Researchers develop a better understanding of a problem area in which they have limited experience. So through literature, one can have a better understanding of the problem. And experience survey concentrates in persons who are particularly knowledgeable in that particular area. So the whole literature is surveyed in literature survey, and experience survey we identify certain persons who are knowledgeable in a particular area, and the survey will concentrate on these knowledgeable persons. Then case study is the analysis of specific examples. So through exploratory research, we can get several hypotheses which will have to be tested for drawing definite conclusions. So conclusive research we use for purpose of testing the hypothesis generated by exploratory research. So exploratory research we can get several hypotheses, and to test those hypotheses we do conclusive research. So exploratory research initially done, it is followed by conclusive research. And conclusive research we use for testing of hypothesis generated by exploratory research, and it can be classified into descriptive research and experimental research. And descriptive research is designed to describe something. For example, the number who saw a specific television commercial. To know that, we have to do a descriptive research. Let us take another example. Say a cereal company may find its sale declining. On the basis of the market feedback, the company may hypothesize that, suppose, let us take one hypothesis, that teenage children do not eat cereal for breakfast. So let us take an example that it finds that teenage children do not take its product in breakfast. So that is the hypothesis, and then we need a descriptive research or a descriptive study to test this hypothesis. So this is an example of descriptive research. Second is experimental research, and experimental research is much more effective than the descriptive technique. Why? Let us find out. So experiment. What is experiment? So experimentation actually refers to the process of research in which one or more variables are manipulated under conditions which permit the collection of data which show the effects. So variables are manipulated, so we can say that it creates an artificial situation. So our experiments create artificial situations so that the researcher can obtain the particular data needed and can measure the data accurately. So the experiments are artificial in the sense that the situations are usually created for testing purposes. The situations are actually created to test. So the experiments can be of two types: absolute experiments and comparative experiments. For example, if we want to determine the analgesic effect of a known drug, say morphine, so it is a case of absolute experiment. But if you want to determine the analgesic effect of a newly synthetic drug, say the test drug, as compared to the standard drug, say morphine, then our experiment will become a comparative experiment. And often we undertake comparative experiments when we do the experiments, and for that we need to do the design of experiments. So these experimental studies are also known as hypothesis testing research studies. Hypothesis testing research studies. Experimental studies also known as hypothesis testing research studies. So hypothesis testing will discuss in detail in another class. But for now, just in hypothesis testing, the researcher tests the hypothesis of the causal relationship between variables. And hypothesis, what is hypothesis? Hypothesis in statistics is simply a quantitative statement about a population, or we can say it is an assumption that we make about a population parameter. So mainly we take a population parameter, and because it is not possible to take the whole population, we draw a sample population and we assume that the parameter, say mean, the sample mean represents the whole population mean. So that means there can be two types of hypothesis. One is null hypothesis and the other is alternate hypothesis. In the null hypothesis, there is no difference between the sample population mean and the whole population mean, whereas in alternate hypothesis there exists a difference between the sample mean and the whole population mean. So for experiment, we take a sample population from the whole population and do the test, and then we get the data, we use the statistics, and finally we will either accept the hypothesis or reject the hypothesis. So suppose we take null hypothesis, then if we reject the null hypothesis, that means there is positive result. Suppose the drug is having significant activity. So we will discuss in detail about this hypothesis testing in another class, and for now we can have two types of research. One is exploratory research, second is conclusive research. Exploratory research is initially done to develop several hypotheses. Then we can do the conclusive research to test the hypothesis, and this can be again of two types: descriptive research to describe something, or experimental research, which is more effective than the descriptive technique. And in experiments we can conduct either absolute experiments or comparative experiments. And in the experimental studies we do the hypothesis testing research studies, and finally we can either accept the hypothesis or reject the hypothesis. So this is all about types of research. Thank you.